Hey everybody, I wanted to talk a little bit about a lot of things, but specifically energy versus structure. Energy is when you put things in conflict. Energy requires focus, but structure is what keeps things together. So for example, when you look at parenting does require energy. But without structure, it doesn't create the most effective environment for a child. In fact, if you had to choose, it'd be better to have structure than energy. Because energy comes and goes, but structure remains. Here's an example. Look at your physical body. Do you need energy to run your physical body? Absolutely. But what is it that keeps your body together? Is the structure. So you absolutely need both. But it's the structure itself that is the primary point. Because without the structure, the energy really, it's kind of irrelevant. The physical universe is a structure. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's our focus on energy as a primary point that's getting us into a lot of trouble in so many different ways. And I mean, we could talk for hours and hours and hours of all the different contexts. But for example, look at parenting in terms of, if you have parents who don't have a structure for their child that is based on principle, but it's rather based on how the parent feels in the moment, which is energy based, it will produce a very unstable child. Because what you have to understand is, as a parent, your primary responsibility as a parent is to develop your child's vocabulary effectively. And you have to understand too that your vocabulary is much more fundamental than what you might be thinking it is based on just me using the word vocabulary. Your vocabulary is the structure of your thoughts. It's the structure of your beliefs. It's the structure of your behaviors. It's the structure of that provides the automatic response to situations. So for example, if you face a challenge, do you persevere and persist, or do you give up? It's the structure that provides that sort of stable point. And so most character defects that I observe when I work with families and I work with children are in the structural elements within a child. I very rarely see a problem where the child doesn't have enough basic enthusiasm for something that they want to do, or are not excited, for example. It's usually not a problem of energy, it's a problem of structure. Because the moment that so even if there's something that they are excited about, the moment that a challenge presents itself and the child doesn't already have the skill to meet that challenge, they give up instead of realizing they have to build that skill. That is a structural point. Your vocabulary is what determines how you think about challenges when they appear. Energy gets us into a lot of trouble because, for example, when you look at those who are very successful in this world, they provide structures. So take for example somebody who is extremely wealthy in real estate. What is it that they actually provide to the world? Is they provide structure. When you drive down the road and when you go into a shopping mall or you go to a grocery store, you're in a structure that someone else or a group of people have placed there. Yes, energy has gone into that, but that structure will be there long after the energy is gone. The structure that you provide for your child will be there long after you're gone. Whether that structure is effective or ineffective. If you do not support your child to have an effective foundation in terms of who they are, in terms of their character, in terms of their ability to process information, then when you're gone, they're not going to be stable as an adult. They're not going to be stable as a teenager. They're not going to be stable if they go to university or when they get their first job, when they're into their first relationship or however many relationships they do have in their life. They're not going to be stable within those points because the structure isn't there. I would go so far as to say that the feeling you have for your child is less important than the structure you provide. Now, you may argue that without having that feeling about your child of love, let's say, you're less likely to provide the proper structure. And that may be true. I won't argue that. But it's not necessary. You may say that it makes it more likely, but that actually would be a character or a character defect or a weakness on the part of the parent. And the problem with that kind of thinking is that it makes it so that parents don't actually care about anybody else's children. Now, I'm not saying it's your responsibility as a parent to provide for or take care of another child, but what happens as a side effect is that we have a society where many, many children go without in this world, and we all benefit from being a part of a system where that occurs. And again, that doesn't mean that it's your responsibility as a parent to go out and take care of someone else's children, but you have to then look at all the ways in which you as a human being participate in a system and benefit from a system that is not best for everyone, and that actually creates situations where parents cannot provide for their children, where they don't have the education to provide for their children. And I understand that many people right now believe that capitalism and the system that we have is the best possible system. It may be the best possible system that we've come up with yet, but it's not adequate. And I was listening to someone today, I think it was Brett Weinstein, the professor in exile from Evergreen College in Oregon. He did a talk called How the Magic Trick Is Done, I think. It's on my Facebook. I posted it the other day. But you can look up How the Magic Trick Is Done by Brett Weinstein. And I'm not sure if it's Weinstein or Weinstein, but it's spelled like you think. And he talks about the whole social justice culture and everything. But he makes this really cool point about the paradigms of left and right are no longer valid, because left and right is more of like, how do you form an economic policy response to the problems in this world, to making a more fair world. There's obviously the polarity of authoritarian versus libertarian, meaning control of government of the population versus maximum freedom of the population. And I think anyone who has common sense would be on the side of maximum freedom. But where people disagree is the side of left versus right, conservative versus liberal or progressive, if you will. You know, meaning do you use the government to intervene and create policies to provide to balance the world out, to make things more fair for everyone? Or do you err on the side of less government intervention and let the free markets and markets basically decide whether or how to create a more fair world? And I think that's where many people disagree, is not really on authoritarianism versus freedom. I mean, unless you're just psychopathic or something, or you just want control over other people. But most people who are reasonable, well-meaning people disagree in terms of whether it should be a policy approach or a sort of hands-off approach, laissez-faire approach, a more, let the markets decide kind of approach. And Brett Weinstein made this really great point. He said, neither of those approaches work. That's obvious. Look at the world. There's still suffering. There's still starvation. Capitalism has done a lot for the world. Yes, it has made progress. No one can argue that. You can argue it, but the argument can be made that a lot of benefit has come from those systems. You can point out the children working in coal mines and things like that is terrible, obviously, back in like the 1800s or something. But the counter argument would be, yeah, but if they weren't doing that, they'd be starving. And look at the children who were growing up in the agrarian communities, and a lot of them were starving and so forth. So regardless, the point is that the argument could be made that neither socialism, communism, or pure capitalism either have a real full answer for this world. There has to be, it doesn't mean it's a combination of the two, but what it means is that really we have to go back to the drawing board and we have to take a radical approach to things. We have to really question all of our assumptions. And that's what I'm doing right now, is questioning the assumption of energy, questioning the assumption of positivity, questioning the assumption of, is it most important to be positive, or is it most important to create a proper structure, a proper foundation? Because when you parent based on emotion and based on feeling, and rather than principle, because principle provides structure. Principle is the structure. It's the guidance system. It's a far more effective guidance system than emotion. The only reason people resort to emotion as a guidance system is because they don't have the structure. They don't have the principle. They don't have built within them the reasoning process based on common sense and based on what's best. So you end up relying more on your emotions and feelings because, let's face it, people don't want to feel bad. So they rely on that feeling to tell them whether they're on the right track or not. Problem is, if you know how to manipulate people, all you have to do is say the right words and you can make them feel good. And it may not be to their best benefit. That's what advertising does. It makes you feel a certain way and manipulates you based on your feelings and emotions. Just watch pharmaceutical advertisements on TV. You can be manipulated based on your feelings and emotions, and that's actually what you're doing to yourself when you're allowing yourself to make decisions based on emotions and feelings. You're manipulating yourself. You're manipulating your decision-making process. And it's a recipe for disaster as a parent to parent based on how you feel. That doesn't mean you can't feel good, but you have to have a principled approach. And what that means is sometimes you will make decisions that are counterintuitive from the perspective of feeling. But the tendency of parents to parent based on either a feeling or a fear is what's destroying our children. We have to have parents who parent based on principle and who know how to provide the proper structure for their child, who know how to structure their child's mind so that that child's reasoning ability and their ability to learn is kept intact as an adult. That's what we need in this world, is children who become adults who can reason effectively and who are still able to learn at their maximum level. Hopefully that didn't get cut out. There was a low connection warning. Again, we need parents who parent based on principle and provide structure for their children so that their children can reason effectively and maintain their learning ability into adulthood and beyond. Because the problems in this world, as I was saying earlier, are not a matter of applying the left or applying the right. It's not progressive or liberal versus conservative. Neither one is going to work. Capitalism versus communism is not going to work. We need something beyond those solutions. And if we don't figure it out as adults, our children are going to have to. And as parents, the best thing that we can leave them as a legacy is to impart in them, an effective reasoning ability, common sense, compassion and care for their fellow human beings, but primarily the ability to reason free of emotional bias. Because the emotional bias, if you reason based on that, you will be manipulated. You will either manipulate yourself, and you will end up being dishonest with yourself and deceiving yourself to the point where you don't remember that you've manipulated yourself, and therefore you will project that outward and blame something else. If you're doing that as a parent, you have to become self-honest because you are projecting that onto your children, and that's what you're teaching them. So how do you as a parent make sure that your child is imparted with an effective reasoning ability and with their natural learning ability intact into adulthood? Is TechnoTutor. It's the only thing out there. So as a parent, for you mothers out there that are watching this, you want to be the best mother possible? Your children need to be using TechnoTutor. Otherwise, you're parenting and being a mother based on emotion only. And I know you love your children. I love my child, and I have another one on the way, and I know my wife loves our children. But feeling love for your children is not enough. Providing them with the most effective foundation possible so that they retain their ability to learn and they can reason effectively in their life. That is the most important thing you can impart. Then everything else, the love, all that stuff is on top of it, is all plus. But if you don't provide the proper foundation for their reasoning and their learning ability, all the other stuff is irrelevant. And all of that is going to be gone. And they won't remember that when they're in adulthood and they're facing those challenges and they're not capable of meeting those challenges. But if you provide them with that proper structure and foundation, they will remember that. And they'll want to take care of you into old age. They'll want to help you. They'll want to support you. My number one rule as a parent is, my goal as a parent is not to ensure that my child likes me when they're older. It's to make sure that they're well prepared to be as effective as possible in this world. So I don't want to manipulate my child into liking me. I don't want to guilt them into liking me. I want them liking me to be a natural consequence of the gratitude they feel because they're the most effective that they could have been because of my role as a parent and the support that I provided. That's what I want. Have a great one. Talk later.